Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar, Improve Supply Chain Resilience with AI and Automation. This webinar is brought to you by Express Computer, powered by IBM. I'm Sudipta Dev, Senior Associate Editor with Express Computer. Supply chain resilience continues to be as vital as ever to ensure the steady flow of goods and services. However, supply chain operations across industries are impacted by a multitude of factors like component shortages, manufacturing delays, and increasing transportation costs, etc. To stay resilient, we can look to the power of AI and the speed of automation to better plan for and manage disruption. Sharing with us the latest developments in AI-based supply chain solutions are our speakers for the day. Vijay Pandiarajan, Director Product Management, IBM Sterling and Cognitive Software, and Wiggs Civitillo, Senior Product Manager, AI Applications, IBM. But before I hand over to them, I'll go over the webinar information. This is an audio and video webinar being broadcasted live and will be available as on demand. We will have a round of Q&A at the end of the webinar. However, you can send in your questions anytime during the webinar using the questions text box, and we will answer the same based on the time after the webinar. If any of your questions are unanswered, we will connect with you over email to answer the same. If you face any technical issues, please try to refresh your browser or else reach out to our team using the same questions text box. There is a survey form. This will appear in your browser once the webinar ends. We sincerely appreciate your feedback. Let me now give a brief introduction about our speakers. So Vijay Pandiarajan, Director Product Management, IBM Sterling Cloud and Cognitive Software, is responsible for strategy and go-to-marketing for IBM supply chain portfolio, while Wiggs Civitillo, Senior Product Manager, AI Applications, IBM is the Senior Product Manager for IBM Food Trust and Blockchain Transparent Supply, an application included in the IBM Supply Chain Intelligence Suite. In this pursuit, he coordinates efforts across engineering, design, marketing, and sales team to guide the development of blockchain-based intelligent supply chain solutions. So with this, I will now request them to take the session forward. Let's hear it from our speakers.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Vijay Pandiarajan at IBM, and I'm here with Wiggs Civitillo today to talk to you a little bit about the IBM Supply Chain Intelligence Suite. We just launched it, and we're super excited. We think it's going to be a game changer when it comes to managing supply chain disruptions. So let's get started. So here are some topics we have lined up for you today. As we get into supply chain intelligence, let's talk about the trends and challenges, right? Like, why do we need this today? What are people seeing, and why has their lives completely changed that they actually need a new way to approach the problem, right? We'll get into that. As a part of that, we'll introduce the Supply Chain Intelligence Suite, right? How it helps solve those problems. We'll get into some use cases and customer examples so you can see how this has actually impacted other people and sort of be inspired in a sense of how this can work for you as well. And then we're going to actually show you the product, right? Wiggs is going to give you a demonstration. We're going to talk about managing shelf life risk, very topical situation. But there are any number of different use cases that can be modeled and managed inside the supply chain suite. Finally, we'll take some questions. Feel free to engage in the chat. We'll be taking those chat questions, and we'll take any questions that come after. Clearly, supply chain is sexy. And that's not something I've ever said. And I've been in this space a while and I haven't really said that a lot. But it certainly has been in the last 18 months or so, probably a little longer than that. And part of that, I think, is really exemplified when you look at the headlines, right? Supply chain is now a matter of popular conversation, just as much as the next big movie that's being launched. And so it makes the front page of major newspapers. So this is just in the last 3 months, the Wall Street Journal. Headlines revolving around supply chain that I think really illustrate the problem that supply chain practitioners or anyone really related with supply chain are facing. Certainly on the one side, there's demand fluctuation. It's to some extent completely gone off the rails without being able to predict what things were, right? When the normal changes so much, any prior knowledge of what you knew is not very useful anymore. So any previous plan plus or minus kind of things are very difficult. There's certainly on the other side supply imbalances as well, exacerbated by many different things, right? There's been COVID has certainly played a part in it, but there are other disruptors as well that has certainly shifted out the supply, the steady supply flow that we've seen. Let me just pick out a few at random right here. So you can certainly tell on the supply side, we've all talked about the chip shortage and very specific componentry that goes into a number of the devices that we're all using. Now, play that up with the demand fluctuation that's come because everyone's working from home or doing WebEx or, the need for personal computing devices has gone completely off the rails. So when you match the two together, you've got like a real whiplash effect going on, right? Just cause and effect right there. Not just high-tech equipment, think about earth-moving equipment, think about other equipment as well. Car manufacturers have seen this. Just assembling the kits necessary to put together either in a build to order scenario, right, where it's very specialized and you have to have a very specific part and there are very few optional parts that you can switch out, or even mass manufacture of things, there's been a real problem. And again, a variety of reasons of things getting snarled up on the supply side. Now, between the supply and the demand side, you actually have the logistics and the transportation, and that's also had its own set of challenges. I mean, you see like really silly and crazy things that make the headlines, like air cargo boom has car tires flying first class, right? So it's no one else flying in those first class seats. These tires have to get from here to there. So that would be like a headline from Crazy World 3 years ago, right? But it's there, and we're looking at it right now. So strange times call for strange improvisations, right? And really what the point I'm trying to get to is that there is no normal, and innovation and experimentation is sort of the order of the day when it comes to supply chains. And it isn't going to change really quickly, right? This isn't going to go away. This is not a small term phenomenon that's just going away. If you just think about, like, we all know about the Suez Canal thing because it dominated world news for a while, right? With the Ever Given being stuck. But US ports are still seeing shipping logjams, right? That's one of the headlines in here. So you're still going to see problems going out. They're maybe not at the scope of something that captures world news, but it hasn't gone away. This problem is going to persist. You're going to have to invest in your approach to solving this problem, and also looking at the tools that you're going to be using to solve this problem. So here are some. So what does this mean really? Like let's look at some specific things, right? The supply chain complexity is maybe off the charts at this point. We've seen that, and there's like the level of complexity has gone up, partly because you've got to be adding new suppliers. You've got to be changing out the way you're doing things. You just got to be looking for really creative ways of doing anything. So if you've got some processes already modeled, the complexity of those processes is going to go up tremendously. If not, you're actually creating new processes from scratch, right? So there's certainly that complexity factor that's gone really high. Visibility remains a real big issue. I would submit to you, though, that visibility on its own only tells you where you're failing, doesn't give you a way to rectify it. So one of the things that we've really taken on board, and our point of view, is not just being able to see, but being able to do, right? So not only should you be able to see it, you should be able to research what needs to be done, make a decision, and actually do them, right? Like, and we want to be able to give you the tools to do all of that, right? That's going to be some of which we're going to be talking about some more, and Wiggs will show you some of that as well. I also want to mention just food waste and products that are being tracked through the supply chain, right? Like, how can you make sure that the right product is in the right place at the right time? And this has always been a problem, right? This has been an inefficiency that we've always seen, but becomes even more exacerbated in this current environment. So if we're looking at some eye-popping numbers in terms of food waste, as one example of fresh food that's progressing through your supply chain, how might you actually look at that? And really that brings us into the larger question of transparency. Like, where did your stuff come from, especially from a marketing perspective on the CPG or the retail side or luxury goods side? Full transparency, people are willing to pay for that, right? So are you going to be able to build products that can show that off and take advantage of it? So it's one thing to get the right product at the right place, but are you actually taking advantage of customer sentiment with the desire to buy products that actually have full transparency? How would you prove that to them, right? So there's another product opportunity for you as well. And also in terms of environmental impact, right? If you're actually able to see this and prove it, there are customers willing to pay for it in this time and age right now. So what would that look like? What would your products actually look like? So these are probably it's a good representation of the kinds of opportunities that are out there. One from an operational standpoint, and two from just the kinds of products that you should be putting together and promoting at this time. So where does that all bring us, right? So we're now tasked with a set of our peers who are, and likely many of you listening in here today, looking at living in this world and trying to make sense of this, right? So I don't know, in the Q&A, we can certainly talk about, right, like, are your tools actually working out for you, right? Like, are you able to get what you need? Where are the shortcomings? And I would submit to you that you probably have tools that you're improvising with, whether they're custom built or something that you've had for a while. You need intelligence now, right? And it's not intelligence in the abstract sense. It's intelligence in the context of the problem you're solving, right? Whichever one it might be. And we'll get in a couple of scenarios so you can see what we mean by, intelligence in the context of in the context of the work that you're doing. Really, we see, we've called out 3 sample personas, if you will, but I think they fall into large categories. So VP of supply chain, you're really looking at end to end, right? Do I have the visibility across all my systems? Am I sub-optimizing? Can I tell what the overall impact is? Can I anticipate these disruptions? Can I fix them? I kind of want my overall macro level thing to run correctly, right? So that's one kind of class of users. We also have, think of somebody who's trying to source material, right, for whatever thing that you're looking for. So we call them supply assurance or an inventory manager, goes by different names, right? And you're really focused on the supply side of things. If I have to produce this particular good, whatever it might be, do I have all the bits that I need? Or are my assembly lines or my packaging facilities, are they going to start not being able to produce what I need, right? Where do I need to get my supply position so that I can work in the most optimum way, that I'm keeping up with customer satisfaction, I'm meeting my SLAs, and in general, just meeting my business objectives, right? So from a sourcing and getting the right product, getting the right source materials in the right place. And then really the third class is about a fulfillment manager. Right? Once I have something, can I get it out to the right place? In Wiggs's demo, he'll talk to you about shelf life risk, which is we actually have to get certain products placed in the right spot. It's not right now, and for various reasons. And so how would you do that, right? And as a fulfillment manager, how do you know, one, that something's off the not working quite like the way it should? And remember, you've got probably hundreds, if not thousands of SKUs that you're responsible for, right? Like, so how would you know which one it is? How would you isolate it? How would you track that, right? Because it's seldom one thing that you do and you're finished. How do you actually track it all the way to the end and then make sure that the right outcome that you wanted was done, right? So again, I'll come back to not just being able to see, but actually being able to decide and actually do. So we picked 3. I think they're fairly representative of an overall a supply side and a demand side. So you can sort of imagine, even if you're not exactly these roles, which one you're most closely associated with, or probably it's a mixture of all of these things, right? So, and depending on where your issue is, you will need slightly different processes, which the system can extensively support. So let's talk a little bit about what it is, right? So we're talking about an AI-based supply chain system, right? And so what is it? How is that different, right? How is that different than what you currently have, and what kind of outcomes do we think we can help you drive with this? One of the biggest things is about time to value, right? So if you've got a system set up and your current one doesn't work quite so well, how quickly can you get set up and get going with a set of tools? And again, we encourage really to look at the point of greatest need, right? So if you've got a particular area or a particular process or a particular supply chain situation that is giving you the most trouble, you can very quickly get started with that, right? So picking up the tools and using them should be really quick and easy. A lot of that has to do with how data is brought into your system, and then how easily can I start manipulating the data and making it actionable and with the intelligence, right? So there's a lot of that we've put a lot of thought into. There's this idea of agility, right? The idea that no matter what you have isn't going to be very relevant for very long. So I like to think of it as you're not really building it to last. You're building it for change, right? So built for change, not built to last. And that's the core idea of this agility thing, right? So if it's one problem with, I don't know, electronic componentry on one end, and you've got a different problem in a different part of your supply chain with some of the machinery that's actually doing putting together your product, you should be able to manage every bit of those things. The problems today are not necessarily the problems of tomorrow. So this idea of agility and how quickly can you adapt to change will be a factor that determines whether you evolve or you go extinct, right? So there's this sense of evolution and how quickly you can evolve. And then finally, this sense of resiliency. So despite all the wide variations and despite all the disruptions, are you able to have a system that can get you back on track, right? Can you course correct? And better yet, can you chart a path forward where you're not necessarily recovering, but you can actually tell ahead of time what needs to happen? We actually have a demo here that we'll include in the resources. We're not actually going to show you this bit, but there's one where you're literally looking at where would I transfer inventory from one place to another, and if you didn't look maybe 2 weeks or a month out, you might actually make your problem worse, right? And it's actually fairly common knowledge that sometimes when your systems are working and you're sort of interrupting them, our human tendency is to interrupt them too much in the other direction, right? So we certainly look at giving you a longer runway into knowing what you're doing, so you're anticipating. So one, what might happen next, and so you're sort of preemptively making your corrections in the appropriate manner. And I think those are some of the kinds of things that really are game changers when it comes to applying intelligence, within your supply chain. It does apply to a wide variety of industries, right? We talked a little bit so far about on the industrial side, distribution, certainly on retail and CPG as well. So I won't kind of pull these out, but my point is that the processes, while they're similar, the points of emphasis and the kinds of actions that you might take actually might vary depending on your industry. And we fully recognize that, right? So really the idea of the intelligence platform, it is a platform at the end of the day, is that you can customize the kinds of actions that you take. we give you a construct, and we give you certain patterns in the way you work, and there are some very easy ways in which you can assemble your own artifacts. So you'll hear the idea of a work queue, right, that keeps up with certain types of problems. You'll hear about Data Explorer, right, like that lets you get into aggregated data from different places, right? So it's not just if you have, I don't know, 10 ERPs, maybe more. It all pulls that together so you can see it. And then finally, the actions that you're taking themselves, right? Those can be customized. So if you're an electronics company, right, and you're looking to you're making sure your parts are together so you can meet your SLAs, the kinds of actions that you take are clearly going to be different than a CPG company that's looking to improve inventory turns. Similar processes, similar artifacts, similar data objects, but the things that you do with them are different. So really the suite is built to handle all of these different scenarios with common constructs that work and with a common data model that gives you the basis for being able to manage any one of these different things, right? So We think that's another huge game changer when it comes to modeling and managing your processes with the suite. So let's get into some of the common use cases, right? Again, there's a wide variety clearly from all those industries. There are many more. We pick a few that I think are illustrative, and we know customers have already derived some value from this. So let's talk a little bit about, when you're tracking and tracing goods, it's kind of important to look at things like temperature control, especially in certain kinds of industries, like so pharma. That's probably a pretty specific one, but you can see this also applying in things like retail or where refrigeration is kind of important, and you're managing where things go. Right. Simple example of track and trace. You can think about out of stock. How do you? Anytime something is out of stock, you've just not made a sale, right? So this is on the fulfillment side. And I think it's also really important to look at approaching out of stock, right? To some extent, out of stock you're already out of luck. You've already sort of messed up and you've already lost the sale. Approaching out of stock actually gives you an opportunity to do something about it. And I actually think that that's hugely important, because if you're able to catch all your approaching out of stocks, then hopefully you don't actually get to an out of stock situation, right? So how do you manage that? How do you see it? How do you detect that? I think is a pretty common one, applies again across a bunch of different industries. But again, the actions that you take are different, and you can totally customize what you do. Being able to procure critical supply, right? Like either if it's a build to order, or even if it's not, it's like existing run-of-the-mill kind of manufacturing. How do you make sure you've got the products that you need? How do you make sure you've got all the raw materials, all the supplies, and everything else that you need, like we talked about? I think that's a pretty shining use case for us as well. Critical supplies. I mean, COVID, I think, has brought this out to the fore. We've certainly seen a lot of PPG that has to be moved around, has to be put in different places. I think we've worked with a number of customers. Just being able to monitor how the usage of that has happened and how reorders happen. Are they going to the right place? Is it going to the right facility, within a particular network? How do you manage all of those kinds of things? Certainly food spoilage. We talked a little bit about the amount of waste. It was kind of an eye-popping number. How do you manage that as well? How do you reduce spoilage? How do you improve shelf life risk management? Managing product recalls as a sort of corollary to that as well is an important one, right? So I think everyone remembers the story of the contaminated lettuce. So what kind of recall do you need to do? How surgical can you be in that recall with the least amount of disruption, but at the same time, maximizing the safety of the consumer? That shelf life risk management, we're going to come back to, right? That's going to be the focus of the demo later that Wiggs will take you through. So I kind of want you to keep an eye on that and remember that one. But again, a wide variety of use cases, matching those personas that we talked about, right? And there's also some around 3PLs and just the transportation side of it as well. So there's a broad set here. So how does this all actually work, right? So sounds pretty good, does all of these different things. So let's sort of peel it back a little bit and just see what the premise is, right? I kind of call this the physics of the product. How does the product actually work? Really what we're saying is that there's a lot of data sitting in your ERP systems, and that's sort of the system of record, right? And I know many of you have more than one ERP system, and data is spread across these different places. You're not going to change that anytime soon, right? And we see that and we appreciate that. Really, our point of view here is that how can we help you unlock the data that's in there and actually cross-match, correlate, and understand what the real story is across all the systems that you have. So there's this idea of data standardization, bringing the data in, understanding the data, cataloging it correctly, and drawing inferences from that, right? And that's we talk a little bit about how do we enrich that data? How can we help you understand what all of that stuff means, right? We run that then through our rule engine. Really, it's an intelligence engine at that point, right? Some simple things are just declared business rules. so you can tell what it is. It's you know this a priori, right? Like you know this is common. I call this the codification of common knowledge. When this happens, then do this, right? So we can express some of those kinds of things very easily. There are other things that you may not actually know a priori, right? Like this is when you're trying to explore and find relationships that you didn't know existed, or you're trying to explain relationships that don't make sense to you, right? Like, well, this happened and that happened. I don't understand why. So I need the context around that. That's the time when we really see running some AI models actually help you decipher what that is. Think of it as, you've got your X-ray glasses on, and you can actually sort of penetrate through the fog of the data to actually tell what's going on. And so that's the next level of sophistication that we have on top of that. And really, as a combination with those kinds of with that kind of approach, you can detect exceptions, either ones that you just knew and you just wished you cataloged and you kept up with them, and ones you didn't know about, right? But again, it's gotten into an exception kind of scenario. So now you're able to manage by exception. And we think that this is really important, because not all problems are the same, but as humans, when we can catalog the kinds of problems we have, we're much better at knowing what each thing means, right? So if you take your email inbox today, I'll go to that, you can get all sorts of emails in there, and each one is completely different than the other. However, if you actually had something that was very sorted, and let's say going back, we had an approaching out of stock scenario, and you were able to gather all of those somehow, right? And you knew you had 40 of those. So one, you would know you had 40 approaching out of stock scenarios that you had to deal with. That itself is very useful. Second thing, you could sort of ramp your way through those and actually apply the context that you're in, right? So before you go to the next meeting, you're taking care of 3 of these, then you're back, and then before you go to lunch, you're knocking off a couple of them. It's because you have context. You know what to do. You kind of have a playbook. You look at the data that we've gathered for you. My point is, it really helps to classify the kinds of problems you have into what we call work queues, right? And you could have multiple of these, and then your approach to solving them becomes a lot easier. Now, these then get put, from transparent supply and control tower. These are some of the constructs that we feel we can put around the applications that we have. So the control tower helps you see these things, manage them. Think of it as your dashboard into what is happening out there, right? And these are all completely customized. They have the kinds of tools that you need to assemble not just information widgets, but then also research and decision types of information that's put in front of you. You can walk through those, make a decision, and then actually take some action. On the transparent supply side, you can. This is where a lot of the track and trace portions come through. You can see the provenance of where things have been, and also I think you'll see in the demo. You can go back in here to see whether things actually reached where they were supposed to reach at the end, right? So you can come back and actually confirm as a result where things are supposed to go. And then ultimately, a lot of these, you learn from what is going on here, right? And you keep up with that. That goes into your queue history. You get a lot of heuristics that come out of this after you've run this a while. And you can actually get even more smarter about cataloging, managing, and looking at more, shall we say, happy path flows that you can fully automate at some point as well, right? So there's the human to human interaction automation, and then there's the fully automated aspect as well that you can get to. So hopefully that gives you a sense. It demystifies, okay, how does all of this actually work? It gives you a simple way of understanding where the data comes from, what we do with it, and how you're actually able to make a decision and take action on it. So a lot of what I described, I think you can see here. This is our first sort of glimpse at the product. So here we're actually looking at a dashboard, right? This is you can see there are a number of things that are specific to you. This has been customized for whoever put this together. So there's a set of work queues here, right? So there's an out of stock inventory approaching out of stock, shelf life risk, which Wiggs will show you later, right? There's a number of these, and I go back to, these are cataloged problems already, right? You already know, you've seen an issue come in, you've categorized it as these, and you can tell the number of issues you have. So you have 13 out of stock inventory things. So you know 13 places where you're not selling what you should be selling. And you can click into that and actually start working on each of those things, right? So I think that's, you're able to see, catalog, make sense out of it, and actually do something about it. You can see some other things here. For example, this out of stock inventory, I think, is actually one of the sets of things. That one was important enough that the person promoted it to their dashboard. They said, I want to see this all the time, right? So here's an example of it actually being customizable. You could choose to see it or not, or have something else on there. You can see some other things here, which are more informational widgets, but it tells you, gives you some context of, how much 15 out of 38. So a lot of this is about getting context. Even if it's informational, it's information in context that you can see. And then across the top, you can see we've got other objects. This is just the overview, but if you really want to look at just inventory or shipments or supply, you can have custom dashboards for things like that. And then on the left side here, you'll see, there's a place for Data Explorer where you can get in and actually explore the data. We talked about that a little bit, and just a place where you can manage all your work queues as well. And then there's the transparent supply application itself, which has underneath it the track and trace. It's not open, you can't see it, but you'll get to see it when we do the demo, right? So the important thing here, I hope you take away from this, is that it's a zoo out there. There's a lot of crazy things happening, but you're able to actually bring in the data, extract out the bits that you need, get it to a point that is actionable, and then actually track your progress towards solving that, right? So you can manage all the insane amount of disruptions that are happening outside. So when it comes to a control tower, you can see there's a number of different things you can do. We've talked about some of the learning aspects of this. It's about pulling in the data from different places. There's this idea, everything ranging from visibility on the top, going all the way down to looking at the recommendations themselves, right? And between that, before you get to the recommendations, what's actually different, right? Like, so help me see it. Some of those you might actually not know a priori, and you have to explore it. Some other things you actually know, you can just jump down to the prioritized recommendations. And then ultimately, there's this idea of taking action and fixing it, right? So you can see a process getting kicked off, where seldom is the time that you press one button and you're done. You may have to do something, you've diagnosed it, two other people may have to do something, and then the problem gets solved, right? So being able to manage all of that right in here. So just a sense of the gamut of things that we do in the control tower. The one thing I want you to take away from this is that you're not just seeing, you're seeing, analyzing, doing, and then learning. I think that's an important distinction here. And then we have transparent supply. We've talked a little bit about this, right? It so happens that we have blockchain built in. That's how the data is immutable. Once it gets on there, it does not change. And you can actually know and trust that the information we're telling you, no one has had an opportunity to go and tamper with it, right? So if you go right from the start, from where something was sourced, you can see it going through all those different steps and where it gets to the other end. Every bit of that information can be stored, and it is completely trustworthy and reliable, right? We use this quite extensively when it comes to all our track and trace and provenance related information and anything we do in the application. We also have the ability, once you know your scenario, to convene a network around that, right? And IBM Food Trust is probably the most well-known one of those, where IBM has convened the network of fresh food providers, Walmart being one of them. We'll talk a little bit about customers in a bit, and helping them work with their suppliers to know where all their fresh food came from and where it went to, right? So when we talked about doing a product recall, you can be pretty surgical. You can just get to a particular lot on a particular farm, and that's the only bit you have to recall. You don't have to recall everything, right? So how are you able to do all of that? That's because we've convened that network, people join the network, the information's there, we're able to present it to you. You can also convene a network of your own choice, and we've got customers that have done that as well. ATD, a tire distribution company, has done something similar to that. So food and tires, very different things, but similar kind of convening of the network and actually being able to trace where things came from. The good news is all of this is sort of packed into this application that we call Supply Chain Intelligence Suite. And we've got all the tools to help you do this, everything from needing to onboard somebody. So if you choose to join one of our networks, existing networks like Food Trust, Or if you want to convene your own, we can help you with that as well, right? We've got the technology tools and the people to help you with that. So that gives you a little bit of a sense of what the transparent supply application is about. Here are some networks. We talked about, I just mentioned the tire network, right? And we talked about Food Trust. Here are some others, a seafood network. So you can trace where the fish and everything else is coming from, where it's going, what's the provenance. Is it also where it says it's coming from, right? That becomes really important. Even that probably even more important in the e-provenance network with the wine, right? Like which vineyard was this sourced from, which year. You can think about that, and you can tell clearly that in that demographic, that kind of information is extremely important. We have a similar one with the coffee network and what we call Farmer Connect, right? And so this helps you know which farmer actually grew the beans from which your coffee was made. And if you wanted to actually tip that farmer, you could through the network. And the only way we're able to do that is because we know where it came from and it can get all the way back to them, right? So it's an interesting exemplification of why these networks are so powerful. Okay, so why is this unique? So hopefully by now, since I've been talking at you for a little bit, some of these things are sort of self-evident, right? The idea of intelligence is very centric to what we're doing here. Once the data is gathered, it's knowledge. How do you put together the knowledge you have a priori and knowledge that you don't have or you're going to discover? How do you make that all actionable for you? The idea that it is actionable, right? Like that you can see things and you can actually do things, right? The constructs are there. We figured it out so that you don't have to, right? Like really the idea of a suite is that it's a set of componentry that works together and works the same. So things like work queues and other constructs that you see are really important in making these things actually actionable, which leads into the work patterns, right? We totally believe this is about improving the productivity of people in the supply chain discipline, right? So if you're sitting in front of this tool, we want this to be the fastest way you can solve a problem. And so, you can get through your set of things and get home on time or get off Zoom on time or, wherever else you might need to be, right? The idea is increasing productivity for this practitioner. And so we give you the set of tools to customize these, build them, and actually manage them in that manner. Where does all the data come from for this? That's really what I think about when I think about plug and play, right? So if we're not able to help you source this data really quickly, and you've got this data and sitting in different places, we wouldn't be very successful. So it is one of the cornerstones of the way we think about this problem, right? So bringing your data in easily, getting them actually rationalized into the set of objects that you saw on that screenshot that we had becomes really important, because that's the only way you can actually understand what's in there. We have a lot of experience at IBM dealing with complex problems like supply chain problems, right? And there's a lot of resources, research, know-how, and just plain assets and products that we're using when we build the suite, right? So for example, in that workflow portion of it is actually one of the BPM engines that we've got at IBM. We didn't have to reinvent that, which meant that we could get this out sooner into market. And it is one of the industry leading state management systems out there, right? So when we're able to actually pull all of that together, we have a real head start in building super robust applications. The important thing is we're not asking you to integrate any of that. That's all in the product and all works out of the box from day one, right? That's I think one of the really big pluses right here. Not only do we have the technology that's proven, but it's already in an actionable form for you. And that's really that idea of workflow automation as one of those components that we've put in. It's an add-on. So if it's something that's important to you, it's an add-on, you can get it. But it's all, again, pre-built, pre-wired, and ready to go. So just a few things that I kind of want to call out. Why, how is this different, unique? And how do we really come through on this idea of intelligence and solving your problem in the most creative way possible? Here are some more detailed personas. We sort of touched on this before. This breaks it out a little bit more. I won't spend a ton of time on this. I think you can see they still fall within those three categories: people who care about the overall, maybe supply side, demand side. And there are probably some people that are in that logistics mode that we didn't call out before, like somebody like a distribution specialist, right? So gives you a little bit more fidelity as to the kinds of personas that we've been working with. So let's talk about a few examples. So Telstra is one of our customers down in Australia. And really what they were looking at is, like, Australia is a big country, and there's a lot of disruptions that happen due to natural weather events and other things. And losing power is not, for these remote communities, is actually a real problem. It can be life or death sometimes. And so Telstra trying to keep up with equipment so that people can stay connected becomes a really, really big deal. And so they were using our product to keep up with where they needed to have spare capacity. So in case there was an outage, they could be back up again and keep the community connected, right? So inventory visibility and forecasting as much as they could where they might need additional parts so that their network could continue to operate and the communities could stay connected was really a big was a big thing. So placement, product placement, which warehouse needed to have what, was something we really helped them out with. So that's one example on, shall we say, like on the industrial and physical goods kind of side. Walmart needs no introduction. Huge retailer here in the United States, and I believe spreading out into the rest of the world as well. They needed a quick way to do the recalls like we talked about, right? Needed to be able to trace where things came from. And really it was about confidence. It was about brand confidence and being able to not have to issue massive recalls that tarnish their image as well, not to mention the safety of the consumer themselves, right? So with Walmart, really the idea was what they were able to get done from weeks of trying to run a recall to figure out where they needed to go, trace what needed to be pulled really, really quickly. That meant that all the time saved meant fewer people being affected by it, and less of a big public black eye, right? So when you're managing an exception scenario like this, the sooner you can do it, the faster you can do it. Bad things happen, but it's about how you recover. And for that brand promise, that was one of the things that was very important to Walmart. And this is Carrefour, another supermarket, right? And sourcing information, this became really important for them, knowing where it came from, right? I think there's a big trend in the heritage of where products come from, and certain products have that kind of cachet, right? And Carrefour wanted to take advantage of being able to use that product origin to better position and sell certain products, right? So obviously, if they're able to tell that story and sort of back it up, they were able to increase their revenues and also improve that brand trust, right? Overall, they were able to say, I didn't know that about this particular product, and so I would buy it here rather than buy it somewhere else, right? So that information becomes a source. This is a case of it. This is not an operational thing, but this is actually a revenue driver for them because they're able to take advantage of this aspect of the product. So just a few examples. You can kind of think through between these and some of the use cases that we've gone through. You can start thinking about how you would, some similar situations that you can take advantage of what we have here. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Wiggs to take you through the demo so you can actually see the product in action.
Thank you, Vijay. So Vijay's covered quite a bit of the value proposition of what the supply chain intelligence suite offers. He's even given you some hints at what it actually looks like. So at this point, I'm sure you're excited to actually see it in action. He's also talked about many different personas. And so we're going to focus in on one persona for this use case. But it's important to know that there's so many different scenarios that could allow the suite to add value to different players in different industries, different roles. And I think I would challenge you all to use your imagination on how this scenario could apply to where you fall within your own organization. For this specific scenario, we've identified a role as Sam, the inventory manager. So Sam is working at Neighborhood Stores, which is a grocery retailer with stores across the US. And his focus is to monitor his company's products across their supply chain to prevent inventory spoilage by optimizing product shelf life. Now, we've used a scenario for products that actually have spoilage, but this applies to many different industries with products that are outside of the food industry as well. So this role of SAM, in his job, he may be responsible for monitoring, directing inventory to make sure that products get to stores where they'll sell the soonest. But it really is especially important for perishable goods, which is why we've chosen this example for this scenario. So within the supply chain intelligence suite, he can log in at any time to see if any products have been delayed and may be at risk of expiring before they reach store shelves. And that gives him a chance to get them to a place where they'll be sold. So with that, we'll dig into a demo and I'll show you where he would log in. So when Sam logs in, he arrives at the dashboard page. As Vijay mentioned, this page is customizable, so he can choose what cues that he's starred, what he wants to see, and he can really focus in on the items that are most important to him. Now, on the left-hand side, we can actually see the full navigation menu, and we can see it's broken down into two main categories. We have the control tower that includes the dashboard view, the work queue view, and the data explorer, which Vijay was talking about earlier. And then we have transparent supply, which includes the ability to trace your products, manage, upload, and share documents and certificates, and then enter data and manage your data access controls within the transparent supply and on the blockchain. So on this day that Sam logs in, he's actually very interested in addressing any shelf life risk issues. So with that, he delves in to shelf life risk. Once he clicks in, he takes a look at the list of options that he has before him, and he wants to focus on where he has the highest quantity at risk, right? And so he can take a look and he can see that first item there has 360 cases of 16-ounce broccoli, carrots, and celery crudité packs that are at risk, between 1 and 2 days at risk, and they're expiring on November 24th. And the day that he's looking in is November 15th. So they're nearing expiration, and he knows that he'd like to start here to make sure that they get somewhere where they can be sold. So he clicks into this item to learn a little bit more. And when he arrives on the resolutions page, he can see, here's sample resolutions, here's what he could do with this crudité pack. And he could actually build out his own sample workflow. So if he has things that he'd like to do and things that he'd like to do on a recurring basis and share with coworkers on how to execute or address a specific issue, he can build in those workflows himself. Now, if he scrolls down, he can actually see a host of additional details that he can use to analyze what he actually wants to do with this set of crudité packs that are at risk. So we can see, again, the quantity is 360 cases. He can see that makes up 5.4% of his total inventory. So he knows of his entire inventory of crudité, that would be a significant loss if this product were to expire, and that would be a hit to his baseline. So he knows he needs to do something here because it's just sitting at a distribution center. And he can see that, it's 1 or 2 days at risk, and the trigger is about 3 days. And he can actually look down at the bottom at that at-risk timeline, where he can see when he received the product, when the trigger went off, what today's date is, and when the product's going to expire. So easily he can tell, he has 4 days before the product expires for the 60 cases, and then he has 5 days before the product expires for the 300 additional cases. And he can easily look on the histogram to see what products are at risk, all highlighted in yellow. And he can also see that he has some upcoming products at risk as well. So he needs to be aware that he's going to have some new additions to this work queue coming in the next few days. So he needs to do something soon, and he needs to be ready to find out where to allocate the upcoming inventory that's soon to be at risk. Now, finally, he can use this view to analyze the location, right? So he knows this distribution center, the DC number 1003, is in Fremont, California. He can see to the left, the average inflow day is about 2.4 days. But the average outflow day is slightly concerning. That 6.5 days is a little bit above where he wants it to be. So he can make a side note to speak with the location manager to see how they can be more efficient about inflows and outflows to get inventory in and out more quickly, to make sure that it can be on shelves and available to be sold much sooner. So he knows, what he needs to do about the location. He knows he needs to move this inventory to a place where it's going to be sold. So in order to find out where to sell the product, he can actually use additional work queues. So he can go back into the work queues tab And as Vijay mentioned, there are two other work queues that would be relevant here to identify locations where there may be an opportunity to place these products where they're going to sell the soonest. Now, Vijay already mentioned, out of stock, if there are items in the out of stock queue, it might already be too late and you're already missing sales. So fortunately, there aren't any items in the out of stock work queue, but there are 45 instances of products that are approaching out of stock. So these are products that are below the threshold that you've set that you may want to try and route products to so that they would make sure that you don't have any empty shelves. So he's interested in this approaching out of stock, and if he can find a location where crudité is needed, then he can actually route that product and get it on the shelves to be sold. So when he clicks into approaching out of stock, he sees there's one location that has this 16-ounce broccoli, carrots, and celery crudité pack. It's in San Francisco, fortunately not too far away from Fremont. And he can see that there's actually a major shortage of crudité at this location. So he can see the quantity is 20 today, and he can see that it's actually 280 below where they want to be for this store, indicating that that store actually churns through quite a few packs of crudité, and he could actually ship all 360 packs, 360 cases of crudité to this location, and it would put them in a much better place, right? Much closer to where they want to be, with a room above the threshold for these crudité packs to be sold before they expire. So he can click into this work queue detail page, and here he actually wants to take action on his resolution. So he knows exactly what he wants to do. He wants to transfer inventory from the distribution center to that store where it's going to sell the soonest. So we actually have a transfer inventory workflow that will help him with these actions. And so he actually can just click in to get started. And here, it's assigned the work queue to him. It's set it in progress. And he can start the transfer request. So we actually have the ability to allow him to complete a request form. So he clicks in and he can fill in all his details, the date, the product number, the product description, location manager name, where he wants it to be sent. And he can send this request to be processed. And so, once it's filled out, he can submit that request form, and you can see it's recorded. The transfer request was submitted with a timestamp. He can view those request details if he needs to review or make changes. And then he can go back to the shelf life risk work queue to go address any other issues that he has on that day. Now, we fast forward one day and he comes back in to check on the work queue to see how things are going. So when he clicks into this approaching out of stock work queue for the crudité pack, he can see the location manager actually reviewed the request the next day and was successful at scheduling a transport on that day as well. So you've got timestamps for each of those actions. You can review exactly what happened. But this is enough for Sam. Sam knows that the issue was addressed and has successfully addressed two independent work queues. So the shelf life risk has been addressed, so that work queue is reduced by one. And the approaching out of stock work queue is also addressed because now there's product headed to that location. So he successfully addressed both work queues. This work queue item is automatically marked as complete, and when he goes back into the work queue screen, he can see both approaching out of stock and shelf life risk have gone down by one. Now, a couple days later, just to complete the scenario, Sam's manager comes to him and just offhandedly asks, what happened to that crudité pack? I'd like to actually see what happened. Was it delivered to the location, and was it actually put on shelves, and were we able to sell it? So in order to address this, Sam can come right into the navigation here, and he can load a trace, right? So within the intelligence suite, you can run a trace on any product. So we can fill in the product details for the broccoli, carrots, and celery crudité pack. And then he actually has the exact lot that he was looking for. So we know that lot was lot 883. But it's important to note, you could choose a date range, you could choose a serial number, LPN, or serialized shipping container. So in this case, he chooses his lot number, searches for it, is able to find that lot. And when he runs a trace, he can instantly see the entire history of those products, not just from his own view at the distribution center, but all the way back to the original ingredients when celery was processed at a farm as 50 stalks, right? And broccoli was harvested from the farm. So he can see the full history, but more importantly, in this case, he can show his manager, here's where I was, right? And so I received, portions of this lot, 60 cases on the 10th, 300 cases on the 11th. and both of them were successfully shipped out on the 16th, and that lines up with what I saw in the work queue. And I can see, they were shipped from my distribution center to the store in San Francisco. And then once he's verified that, he can actually take a look at the store, which is also registered at an event. And so at the store, we can see the product was actually received. So that means the product was successfully delivered where it needed to go. We can see when it was delivered. It only took 1 day to ship. And fortunately, the product's there with 2 days to sell, which is really great. And that's exactly what we'd hope for in this type of time-sensitive situation. So at the end of the day, Sam, his manager, everyone's happy. They've resolved the issue. This has been, one example of many of a scenario where a supply chain practitioner could find value and really appreciate the visibility and transparency along with actionable insights that would come from the supply chain intelligence suite. With that, I'll hand it back to you, Vijay.
Thank you, Wiggs. I loved how you brought all of those different pieces back together again, right? So the seeing, doing, being able to track those workflows to completion, right? Like you just showed one thing that got kicked off, sort of off stage, people are taking advantage. So, even people who are not in the system, emails go out to them, they can click on it and actually progress the steps that are in there. So it's not necessary that every user in a workflow needs to be in the system as well, right? So that's another important thing to call out if you didn't catch it. But yeah, Wiggs, thank you. That was stellar. Okay, and with that and that nice demo from Wiggs, we'll take any questions. So please feel free to engage us on the chat, give us your thoughts, anything you want us to clarify, anything you found interesting, any great ideas that might have otherwise sparked, feel free to put all of that in the chat. We appreciate it. We'll take through those questions here. If any of this really caught your interest, we'd love to talk to you. We have a really simple method in which we can do a discovery session, just talk to us about what got your attention, where you think this can be used. We have a pretty simple way of helping you isolate down to something actionable for you. For example, we might, in a few minutes of conversation, be able to explain some of the work queues that might be useful for you, right? Just as you saw here, and you can kind of see what your end situation might look like. So definitely take us up on that. And thank you for joining us, and thanks for being a great audience.
Thank you, Vijay and Wiggs, for explaining in such detail how AI-based supply chain solutions can help organizations do more with data and make informed decisions faster. I now open the floor to questions. I request everyone to use the questions text box to send in their questions, and I will take them one by one till time permits. And to answer your questions, let me invite our experts from the IBM Sterling team: Bhalinder Singh, Technical Sales Architect, IBM Sterling; Basavraj Biradar, Technical Sales Architect, IBM Sterling; and Abhijit Das, Business Development Rep, IBM Sterling. The first question is, are you supporting omni-channel order fulfillment flow? Maybe Basavraj, would you like to take this question?
Yeah, so hi everyone. So the fundamental key requirements in today's world, right, whether it is while being placing the order or whether it is related to the post sales experience, the true omni-channel capabilities are the key aspect of any solution in today's world, right? So when I say omni-channel, it is completely related to end-to-end order capture and order fulfillment. For example, if end customer is browsing some product and you want to show the exact inventory visibility to them, considering all your warehouses, distribution centers, stores, nearest stores, you are allowing customer to choose the delivery options, whether they want to pick up from their nearest store or they want the product to be delivered to their home, right? And allowing them to choose the options like multiple shipments, multiple payment methods, right, for the single order, and also allowing them to select a delivery slot, right, what time and what day they want, right? And after that, if they want to modify the order, allowing them to edit the order, the same order ID, so that they can access on all the channels, right? Whether it can be in a mobile application or desktop version, or it can be over a call center, right? So it provides a unique approach for end customer to buy anywhere and return anywhere concept. That's where the omni-channel capabilities are coming into the picture. So any customer can place the order from any channel, return anywhere, like nearest store, or to the warehouse, or collect from the home address, etc. Right? So all those things are the key capabilities of the supply chain solutions that we have been discussing today, like IBM order management system. So that is coming up with the true omni-channel capabilities, like buy anywhere and return anywhere concept. Yeah.
Thank you, Basavaraj. Now, my next question from our audience is, Aisha wants to know, how do you think the use of AI could be implemented in the oil and gas industry, which is a highly unpredictable industry, and it's pretty complex also. And what about transport disruptions? Can AI take that into account? Could one of you take up that question?
Yeah, so if it is, the solution is built in such a way that it is applicable for various different sectors, whether it, whether it can be the gas, automobile, or, the oil sector, right? So when it comes to gas and oil, there are a lot of fundamental things to be ensured, whether it is, maintained at the right temperature in the right container, right? Because we have to categorize the product as highly inflammable products. That solution already has these capabilities. And when it comes to the AI, we bring in the AI concept based on, the system looks into the previous data, the logic considers all the previous history, calculates the best shipping option for any oil tankers or the gas containers, etc. Right? And based on the various factors, like the disruptions, the shortest path, right, in the history, what all would have happened, the system automatically takes care of that. No human intervention is required, and comes up with the best optimal solution to fulfill that particular stock. Right? So that is one of the example, and we can also integrate with various devices with temperature sensors, and which are AI driven, and system captures such information, right, on the platform. So at a very high level, in the available time, I'm just giving some claims, but definitely we can showcase a lot of very relevant use cases when we go further into the next level of discussions. Yeah.
Thank you, Basavaraj. It's good to know, how AI and supply chain can help the oil and gas industry. Now, the next question is actually from Neelima Chaudhary. She wants to know whether this can apply in supply chain in the healthcare sector also, which is also an unpredictable industry.
Yes, definitely. During this pandemic situation, pharma sector is the one which they are exploring so heavily on the order management solutions, because nowadays we can just purchase the medicines by uploading the prescriptions, right? So many such options are available in today's conditions. And that's where our order management system brings in additional capabilities for the end customer, where they can upload a prescription, place the order, and they can choose the delivery slot, like 1 hour, 2 hour, morning slot, afternoon slot, or evening slot, when they can collect the parcel, right? And if you are collecting the products, right, if the products are procured from different sellers, you can do so, because sellers can just push some Excel sheet stock updates and deliver the products to the nearest pharmacies or to the warehouses, etc., and then you can deliver from there. So that can also be tracked, right? And going forward, we also have blockchain transparent solutions that are built on this blockchain platform, right? So in the pharma industry, if you are tracking certain cold chain data, because vaccines or the medicines need to be maintained at a very appropriate temperatures, right? So that all can be tracked, and you can immediately track in 1 or 2 seconds where exactly the loophole is, what went wrong at which facility. In 1 or 2 seconds you can identify why the medicine got wasted, right? So that kind of solutions we already have, and these capabilities are all available out of the box. We're happy to take this forward, this engagement forward with the use case relevant discussion and showcasing those capabilities.
Thanks, Raj. The next question is from Prabhat Sinha, who wants to know, the software is useful for brands. that have a retail store, but what about those brands that are not managing, I think, those that don't have a retail store?
So in a way, yeah, it's the sort of software is not only necessarily built considering retailer or anything. It also addresses various other sectors. For example, if I talk about B2B, right? If there is a huge dependency about if you have a wide larger ecosystem of distributors across country or the globe, you can leverage these capabilities. There is no need to go to the retail level or etc. Only the B2B level we can handle. And if you want to address B2B2B or B2B2C kind of thing, where like kind of Amazon kind of a scenario where business vendors can share their catalog and end customers or another business vendor can purchase, right? So those can be addressed with the solution. Yeah, it's not only limited to retailers. That's what I just wanted to.
Okay, so thanks. The next question is, does your fulfillment operation deliver great experiences? Maybe you can talk about that a bit.
Yeah, very good question. So regarding the fulfillment operations, right? So our supply chain solution comes with rich capabilities like sourcing and scheduling rules, right? The solution is evolved over decades of effort. Almost all the configurations that we need in today's complicated supply chain requirements, right? So are already in the place. For example, if an order is coming from Bangalore, and if the warehouse is one warehouse is in Mumbai and another one is Delhi, and you want to prefer that to be fulfilled from Mumbai, such kind of basic configuration till the complicated level, like out of 10 orders, how many orders you want to fulfill from warehouse, how many products you want to deliver from the nearest store, based on the pin code, based on the distance, based on various such parameters, right? Based on the distribution groups, everything, right? The system automatically takes into the consideration when you configure first time. You can define your own order flow so that your fulfillment operation, efficiency is improved and meets the expectations. So I'm just answering at a very high level. Yeah. So that's core capability that's order management system uniquely brings on the table. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. And the next audience question, which is actually the last one because we just have time for one more question. So what kind of experience would you like to give to your customers?
Okay, so end customer, always once you lose one customer because of a bad experience, they are very hard to come back to your platform again, right? In today's world. So if they have any best experience, that will become their least experience next time they shop, right? So when we speak about giving the experience to the customer, right? Well, when they place the order, also they should be very comfortable if they are doing it on various channels, whether it can be from a mobile application, kiosk, or it can be from over a call center, call order, or any other channel, desktop, website, or marketplace, anywhere, right? They should experience the similar best experience of placing the order, right? They should get the same order status on all the channels. There should not be any mismatch or discrepancies. That gives a lot of confidence to them. And when they walk into the stores also, right, store associates should also should be able to showcase the same set of products which they have browsed online, right? And they should be able to map all the orders against the same registered customers. Likewise, all these things, whether it can be selecting a delivery slot or order modification, which is very difficult in today's scenario, but yes, this solution provides order modifications on the fly. Customer can modify the order with the same order ID, right? And take the options like different addresses to be shipped to and pick up from the nearest store kind of options. All these things collectively together comes in and addresses some of the greater experiences, right, to the customer in today's world. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you, and that's all the time we have for today. I thank Vijay and Wiggs for the informative presentation, and of course Bhalinder, Basavraj, and Abhijit for being there for the audience questions. And to know more, you can get in touch with the IBM team. The contact details are on your screen. And thank you so much, audience, for your interest and time. Please do remember to fill in the survey form at the end of the webinar. And we look forward to welcoming you all our next webinar soon. Have a great day ahead. Thank you.